to Excel Tips. My name is Neale Blackwood, and in this video we're going to look at how we can use dynamic arrays, which is a new calculation engine in Excel, to build a report. Now, in the past I've covered many dynamic array formulas in isolation, and this video is going to bring a lot of them together and show you how you can use them together to build a automated report, basically. So this report requires very little input. All you need to do is put in the latest actuals and this report will automatically update. Now, before we dive in, I'll quickly go through some of the structures that we're going to be working with and explain those. So we're getting data from the GL, and we've got data going back to July 22. I should mention that this is the first in a 3-part series on automating reports with dynamic arrays. So we'll be using this data in the next 2 articles videos as well. It's also in a formatted table. The table name is TBL GL data, and so you'll see that when we come to look at some of the formulas. We've also got a standard budget layout, and this is going to be used to bring in budget data per month and also look at the total. This does provide some challenges, and so we'll see that in some of the solution formulas. One thing to pick up here is the revenue is shown as a minus figure, so it's a credit in the GL, whereas in the budget it's shown as a positive value. So we need to be able to handle that. And to do that, we use our tables. So this is the accounts table. Again, it's a formatted table. And what it's doing, it's got the account number, description, the category. We'll be using the category to create our report. And we've also got a sign. Now that sign is going to allow us to convert our revenues in the GL to a positive value. So obviously in our report, we want the ability to have a positive revenue figure coming up here. So we'll use that sign to do the conversion. We've also got a control sheet here. Now this is allowing us to identify various dates. It's also giving us the ability to override the month. I'm not going to do that here, but you can have, if you want to go back in time and create a report for a previous month, you can do that. One thing I'll show you also, if we go down to the bottom of the GL data, I will drop in February's figures at the end and you'll see how it automatically updates. Now, I have included an old type of report. So this is exactly the same format for the report, but it is using the normal standard formulas. So pretty much every value cell here has a formula in it. So this is how we created the formulas in the past, and we're going to, I might actually hide this sheet now because I don't want to get confused with it. So it is there, so you can right click to unhide it, and I might come back and just show you some things in there, but basically this is what we used to do, and now we have new ways to do these calculations. So I'm just going to hide that sheet. So we're back at the report, and we're going to work through basically from top to bottom, and then I'll have a look on the right hand side where we've got some budget workings. So when we're working with a financial year which starts in July and finishes in June, I highly recommend using a months row. So this month number from 1 to 12 is created using the sequence function. So 1 here means it's 1 row, and 12 means it's 12 columns. There are defaults in there, and the defaults are to create a sequential list of numbers from 1 to 12, basically. You can give it a different starting number, and you can also change what the step is, which is down there. But in this case, the defaults work for us. So that formula is going to give us a sequential list of 12 numbers. That formula is pretty much driving the whole report. So if I delete that, the report crashes. This is a dynamic array formula that spills. So what I've done here is I've removed all of the lines on this report so that you can see the blue line. So this blue, thin blue line that goes across is what's called a spill range. And it goes for 12 columns, and that is creating the rest of the report to go across at 12 columns, basically. This report is going to show us actuals up to January, and then it's going to show us budget from February onwards. So we need a way to determine that. And so this formula here in cell E2 is comparing the date that we have created in row 4 with the month in that control sheet in cell B4, which was January 24. Basically, this returns true or false. And when you multiply true or false by 1, then it converts true into 1 and it converts false into 0. Pretty much binary, and so that's going to display either a 1 or a 0. This is the only validation that I've included in the file, so this is checking that the total profit for the month equals the profit that's in row 5. We're using the SUMIFS function to get the data out of that GL data sheet. This is the name of the table, and that's the name of the column that we're adding up. And we're adding that column up when the date equals, in this case, July 23, which comes from E4. And then we're adding that back to the profit. And by the way, the GL only has profit and loss accounts. It doesn't have balance sheet accounts. The total of the GL will actually be negative, assuming we've got a profit, because the revenue is shown as negative. So we can just add the profit here, which is a positive figure. If we're not actuals, we're working with the budget, then I've got the budget in some workings on the right-hand side of the screen, which we'll get to. And so that's what that part of it does. This calculates the date. So the EDATE function in Excel allows you to add months to a particular date. So we're taking the start month for the year, which is in the control sheet in cell B9. We go have a look at that. Cell B9, that's the start of the financial year. That's calculated via formulas. So the formulas on here are all standard formulas. It's the report sheet that has the dynamic arrays on it. So this starts in July 23 and goes all the way across to June 24. The profit, this is a very simple calculation. I should have mentioned earlier, when you want to refer to a spill range, so this is called spilling, when we spill across, so when it's populating those other cells, when a formula spills across, to refer to that spill range, you use the hash symbol. So this calculating the date is referring to E1 hash. So that spills across. So if I took that out, it's only going to refer to the single row. And as you can see, we've just lost all of the other data as well. And so as soon as you add that hash symbol to it, it's everything else is going to spill across to match that. That hash symbol, which we can see here comparing the profits, allows you to spill across. So that's a very simple formula, but what it's doing is calculating the profit. So it's basically deducting the direct costs and the indirect costs from the revenue, and that spills across using that hash symbol. This is adding up the revenue which is underneath it. So it's using the BYCOL. Now, this structure is fairly common now for when we're working with dynamic arrays. Dynamic arrays can spill down and they can spill across. Your location of a total is going to be affected by how far it spills down. And so if I put a total underneath here, that's still doable, but the problem is that if these accounts expand down, then we might break something and then we need to fix it. And so rather than have the totals underneath, we tend to have the totals at the top because then it's easier to work with. And so what this BYCOL does is it takes the spill range from E7, which we'll look at in a minute, and it breaks it down by columns. So it basically splits up that two-dimensional range into a single column, and then it provides this lambda function with that column in the variable x. and then we just basically sum up that X. So the lambda function allows you to have variables, and the lambda function is required for the BYCOL calculation. So this formula here drives all of the account number calculations. Before we dive into it, I just want to explain the formula on the left, which is giving us our listing of account numbers and the sign. Okay, so this is providing a two-dimensional spill range. We're getting the sign, the account number, and the account description. I just want to show you how this works, so I'm going to break it down. So this is the whole formula, but what I'm going to do is just grab this part of the formula and show you what it gives me. So I'm going to copy that. I'm just going to go down here so we can sort of see it a little bit better. So we'll recreate the formula here in isolation so we can see it. The filter function is filtering the formatted table when the category account equals revenue, which is the value in cell A6. And that's the sequence from the table. So TBL accounts. Now, what I added was a sort, and I did that just in case someone has put the revenue items in a different order. So maybe they've put 3150 at the bottom of the listing, and so to make sure that that is listed correctly in account number sequence, I've added the sort function. The sort function defaults to sorting by the first column. Does what I want, basically. Okay, and then I use that choose columns on there. Now, choose columns allows you to change the sequence of the columns. And what I used was 4, which is the sign, 1, which is the account number, and 2, which is the account description. I don't need the third column, which is the revenue. And so that is how that choose columns works. So that is what that formula is bringing in: the sign, the account number, and the description. I just sort of break that down to sort of explain that better, and that is driven by the input cell here in cell A6. So this formula is the same for the direct costs and the indirect costs. So they populate out of that accounts table the specific categories that we want. Okay, so now let's look at this formula, which is the major one to calculate the values that we're after. So the account numbers by month, basically. So again, we need to use an if statement to figure out, is it an actuals month? If it is, we're going to use a SUMIFS function to summarize the GL data. We're going to add up the amount when the date equals E4, which in this case is July, and when the account number equals the account number. Now, this formula here, the index function, allows us to access the that two-dimensional range and only bring in the second column. So this is bringing in the second column, which is the account number. So that's what that index function does. Here's another index function that's bringing in the sign. So remember, in the GL data, revenues are negative, so we need to multiply them by the sign to convert them into the correct sign, basically, so it's a positive value. Otherwise, if it's not actuals, we're going to go over to the right-hand side and grab the budget, which is in the same layout. And that's in U7, which we're going to look at the budget a little bit later. Okay, so that formula there spills across and down to populate the account number value for each month of the year. So that's really, really powerful. Okay, and to be honest, that formula is exactly the same in that cell and that cell. And the totals, by the way, are the same as the total for the revenue. So that total there has just been copied down. So they're exactly the same structures. So that's it. So all those formulas there are creating the report. We'll have a look on the right-hand side because there is a little bit of a different formula to extract the budget. So let's have a look at that. Here's a different formula too. So this is for the total. So this formula spills down. So it's calculating the total profit as well as the total revenue here. So this is using a VSTACK to combine and basically create a vertical listing of all of the spill ranges from E5, E6 and E7. And that's the profit, the total revenue and the individual revenue items. So that's a vertical stack of that. And then the by row is then chopping that up into rows. It's very similar to the BYCOL. It chops it up by rows, and that row is given to the lambda function as x, and then the sum x. So we've got a single formula here that can basically spill down to do all the totals. This one here is just linked across to the budget on the right hand side. This formula here is the same, but it's only combining two of the spill ranges. So it's adding up the total direct costs with the detail as well. So again, it's a single total that you can copy down in this case to handle the other costs. Okay, so on the budget side of things, this is the same formula for profit. It's just adding up the three spill ranges. This one here is, again, it's the same as we looked at. It's the BYCOL. It's chopping up this formula. This formula is a little bit different. What we're doing here is offsetting the budget. The problem with the budget structure is that it's sort of in a report structure. So the months of the year go across the page. So what we need to do is to create a formula where the column we're adding up moves across the page. And to do that, we're using the offset function. So offset is starting in column C, which is I think it's the account number. Let's go have a look at that. It might be the description. It's the account number. So that's the account number column. And we're going to offset 1, 2, 3 as we go across. So what this formula does is offset has this as a starting position. The second part of the offset allows you to offset rows where we don't want to do that. So we've left that blank. The third part is how many columns to offset. And we've got our sequential number in E1. So that's our 1 to 12. And so what this does is this formula, as it moves across, it is adding up a different column. Now, in terms of the conditions, they're static. So we're just adding up, well, when column C equals, and again, we're using that index. So column C has the account number. And so again, we're using that index, which is the second column C basically in our spill range there that starts in B7. And that formula has been copied down to handle the other entries as well. And then we've got a similar VSTACK column here that's broken down by the row again to get a total. Okay, so let's see how this can update automatically. So let's have a look here. We can see February. February at the moment is using the budget because it's got a 0 here. We can just check that, by the way. So the budget profit is 933,490. Let's go have a look at that. There it is, February, 933,490. Now that's going to change because we're going to drop in the actuals. So again, at the moment up here, we can see that the actuals, it's a 0, so it means it's a budget. Okay, so let's go copy that data from here. So copy, go over to here. Now, this is a formatted table, so when I paste in this data, it's going to automatically extend to include that extra data. So formatted tables work really well with dynamic arrays. Okay, so let's go have a look at the report now. So as we can see now, that's a 1 because that is an actual, and we've got 942 instead of 933. And so now the March should be the first month of the budget. So that's 891,350. So go have a look. 891,350. We've still got all zeros here, so that's a good thing. So that's an example of automating the report. So all we do is drop in the next month actuals and the report automatically creates. As I mentioned, there's 2 more videos in the series and they will allow you to choose a state to report on, and we'll also look at a dashboard that's also flexible. So hopefully this has demonstrated the power of dynamic arrays. Also sort of shown you like a slight change in the structure that you might need, where you have totals at the top rather than totals underneath. You can still put the totals underneath, but you might need to add some extra rows. I'll show you what I mean here. So let's say I change this to direct costs. So what that would mean is we're using direct costs twice, which is wrong, but what I wanted to show you is that how this area here is going to expand. Okay, we get a spill error. And if I click on that, you'll see that this area here needs to be blank. So that's really easy to fix. So all you need to do is insert some rows. To do that is if you hold the control key and press the plus sign, there we go. As soon as you give it enough space, then the report will automatically update. So you could have a total down the bottom here, but as I said, I'm sort of leaning towards having the total at the top. It just requires a little less effort, if you like. And so again, if I put this back to revenue, then I can sort of delete some of those. Control minus, by the way, deletes rows. And I think I had an extra one there, so I'll just open that up. So there we go. So that's how you sort of maintain the listing. If you need extra rows, you just insert them. The formulas will spill down into them. I will quickly just go and show you with this old report, one of the problems with this type of structure is that someone can come in here and just add some money in there, and as you can see, it does get picked up in when we're doing the validation, but it's not really obvious that this cell has been updated, and that, as I mentioned, is not really possible when you're using dynamic arrays. So that's one of the advantages of dynamic arrays. Also, it's just less formulas to maintain because each of these cells has a formula in them. And if you change this formula, you've got to copy it down and across again. Whereas with dynamic arrays, they automatically change when you change that top left cell. Oh, by the way, it's always the top left cell that you refer to as well when you are referring to using that hash symbol. That's the spill range. So you can download the companion file, which is on the In the Black website, if you want to have a play around and try a few things with this layout. So keep an eye out. There's another report coming out using dynamic arrays, and we're also doing a dashboard as well. So they'll be coming in the coming months. Hope you've enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.